Hi, welcome to Lunchtime with Laura. It's Thursday, so it's time to answer some of your questions. This week, the topics that I have questions for are different dog food options, what are the differences between them, and how to know what to choose, and grain-free versus grain-inclusive foods and how to know what to choose. So, exciting stuff. Before I get started in answering those questions, thank you very much for being a part of Dog Food Demystified. I hope that you're finding it a useful place to come to have your questions answered and have a community of like minded dog owners to interact with. It's lovely to have you here, and I hope that you're finding the information valuable. If there are any particular topics that you'd like me to explain more about, then do let me know. I'm happy to incorporate whatever topics you think will be most beneficial for your understanding of your dog's food and nutrition and your dog's health. So please do let me know. As always, do send me your questions, whether it's questions that I can quickly answer directly, or if they're contenders for future lunchtimes with Laura, um, it's all great. So please do send me over your questions to answer. And yeah, thank you very much. So for those of you who haven't spoken to me or worked with me yet, I'm Laura. I'm the pet nutritionist behind Rewarding Pet Nutrition. And essentially, Rewarding Pet Nutrition came about because I found throughout my studies and career in pet nutrition that so many owners find it really complicated and really tricky to understand what to feed their dog, what's in their dog's food, how to go about adjusting their dog's food in a way in which will benefit their health for particular health targets or concerns. Um, and essentially there were so many elements of their dog's nutrition and health relating to their food, which were causing real confusion and overwhelm and stress for so many owners. And I wanted to be able to demystify dog food, to be able to remove that stress and worry around what we're feeding our dogs and provide some answers of what's in your dog's nutrition, a bit of clarity about what the packaging means, and all the other elements of their nutrition and how that relates back to their health. So that's why I'm here. That's why Reward and Pet Nutrition came about, to provide that resource of um that place to come to have your questions answered and provide that information that you're looking for. So I hope that I'm succeeding there and that you are finding value in this group and in Rewarding Pet Nutrition. So remember that I also have a YouTube channel, and you can find blog articles and videos on the rewardingpetnutrition.com website as well. So let's get started. So the first question is differences between the different food options and how to know what to choose. So this is completely valid question that I think so many people want to know. The dog food industry has completely exploded in recent years. So whereas a relatively short time ago, you basically had tins of wet food or bags of dry food, there are now a whole range of different dog food formats for us to choose from. And it's tricky to know what the differences and benefits are between all of those different options. So I'll try and go through a few of those and explain what the differences are. So let's start with dry food. So traditionally, the kind of bags of kibble that you come across, these are usually extruded. So this means that they're cooked with like a temperature, with heat and pressure. So it's kind of like a pressure cooking. And then as the food mixture leaves that machinery, the kibble expands, and that's how you see that kind of expanded kind of biscuit that you're kind of familiar with. So depending on the recipe, the recipes for kibble can vary massively, from more traditional old-fashioned kind of just grain and meat meal recipes to things like 80% 80% meat and fresh ingredients and fresh meats in there, and lots of different not only protein, fat, fiber, nutritional elements, but the ingredients used. So there's a lot of variation here, and so you can see that in the kibble as well. So some of it might be quite big pieces that have expanded a lot and are quite light. Others might be really dense, when there is quite often that's when there's more fresh meat or kind of liquid ingredients in there, and you won't see the same expansion. They'll be quite small, kind of maybe flat pellets. But that is how kibble is made. There's I won't go into the whole process, but the ingredients are combined and ground, mixed with the wet ingredients. It enters the extruder barrel, and then it's cooked into that temperature and pressure. And then as it leaves that extruder barrel and comes through back into the standard air pressure, it expands, and then it's dried, coated, that kind of thing. So in terms of other dry dog food options, you'll see foods that are baked. So this is kind of like a traditional oven system. So it's baking like you would do at home. However, it's just scaled up. So things are more like a conveyor belt system of being baked rather than a small oven. Then you might see things like cold pressed pellets. So this shows some of the same processing that you'd be likely to see in other animal foods. So things like pellets for horses. If you're kind of familiar with things like pony nuts, and that cold pressed pellet format is used for many animal types. So essentially, this is where, rather than the recipe and the ingredients being cooked, they are just like combined. So those, for many ingredients within a dog food, the ingredients would have to have been cooked already to make them safe, but forming them into this cold pressed final format doesn't require any temperature. It's just a pressure thing to form that pellet. So in terms of wet food has so many different choices. So you might be looking at pâtés, chunks in jelly, chunks in gravy, and there are loads of options. But generally, this is all made through retorting. So it basically the can or tray, whatever receptacle is filled with the recipe, and then within that container it's heated, and that provides that kind of cooking step and makes the recipe safe, so it reaches a temperature to go through that kind of critical control safety point, and that's how those are made. They're cooked within the container. You'll see lots of other things as well, like fresh foods and cooked foods, frozen foods, for instance. So fresh foods are prepared differently, so they are generally less processed options. They tend to be prepared by using something called HPP, like a high pressure processing. So this means that rather than having kind of reaching that temperature point to ensure the safety of the food and that bacteria and, for instance, salmonella have been killed, they are processed through this kind of high pressure or radiation, for instance, and that gives that safety step without them being subject to potentially high temperatures that affects the ingredients. So whether it's the digestibility or other different parameters. Frozen foods, these can be cooked or raw, but they're frozen before so before they get to you, and that's like a storage step so that they can be less processed. They don't need the same amount of either processing or ingredients to preserve them. So that freezing step is like a method of preservation. Similarly, you get chilled foods, like refrigerated foods, and that's a method of preservation. Generally, they have a much shorter shelf life, and tend to have had some kind of processing or an ingredient included to maintain that shelf life, to avoid them like undergoing spoilage before it gets to you. And raw foods that they've not been cooked, they've just literally been combined, so they might have had some kind of processing, like grinding them into a mince or forming them into kind of nuggets, but they haven't been cooked. Then they've just gone through this packaging and whatever method they use to ensure the safety, whether that's a kind of irradiation or just testing of their ingredients for those kind of contaminants like E. coli, salmonella, before they come to you. So yeah, there's lots of different choices. In terms of what you should choose, generally, these choices should all have complete and balanced options. And in my opinion, as long as your dog food is complete and balanced for their life stage, it contains all of the nutrition that they need. The method that you choose to feed tends to come down to what suits you and your dog better. So there are advantages and disadvantages to all the different formats of food. Some of them may well work a lot better for you and your dog, but the nutrition provided by all of them should meet the FEDIAF standards, which is like the UK and EU nutritional standards. And so they do contain all of the nutrients that your dog needs. And so the main choice in my mind is that it should be complete and balanced. In raw food, it can be a bit more confusing because quite often raw foods can be marketed as complete, but that can have a different definition to raw feeders. So that might mean that the food meets the 80-10-10 ratios, which tends to be 80% muscle, 10% offal, 10% bone, or a similar ratio depending on what raw feeding kind of routine is being followed. So it's important just to check that it's complete to the nutritional standards rather than that like that feeding method chosen if you're a raw feeder. But yes, choosing complete and balanced food, and there are so many different choices. So if you feel like trying something different, by all means, do give it a go. Just remember to transition between your dog's foods gradually, so that their digestive system has a chance to adapt, and you don't see any upset tummies. And yeah, there's so many choices. So whether you choose to kind of stick with what you know or try some of these new options, then it's completely up to you and your choice. But there's definitely some exciting formats and lovely recipes out there to choose from to keep your dog nourished. So the next question is grain-free versus grain-inclusive foods and what to choose. So this is a bit of a hot topic because from following on from the DCM dilated cardiomyopathy scare from a few years back, where there was this heart condition found in a number of dogs, and at the time there was a lot of accusations that this was a link to grain-free foods. And so from that, many owners chose to avoid grain-free foods and favour grain-inclusive foods again, which really went against the trend, in that at that time the whole dog food industry was essentially moving towards grain-free foods because that was a real main driver, main trend of what was being asked for and a priority amongst dog owners. And then it almost turned around during that time. However, there was never any causation or anything found to show that it was grain-free foods that were linked to this DCM. in fact, they're still not ever clarified what the causes were, but the lack of grain or the presence of legumes in the food hasn't ever been shown to be the cause of DCM or have a link there. And there's been studies into this, and there are still ongoing studies, but there isn't a link been found. And in terms of grain-free foods, at I guess before DCM, this was really sought after in dog foods. People wanted these carbohydrates which were easily digestible and kind of a lower glycemic index, things like sweet potato rather than wheat, for instance. It's kind of lower on the glycemic index, which shows a much smaller peak in blood sugar than wheat, for instance. So you're seeing like a more leveled response in terms of blood sugar to that meal, and that's something that was sought after for dogs to kind of manage things like hunger and kind of busy behaviour. So rather than seeing that rush of energy and then being zonked out, you seem like a more stable release of energy. But that isn't just related to the grain and non-grain carbohydrates. So, that's something that has been claimed for oats, for porridge, for breakfast in humans for a long, long time. And for instance, white potato is higher on the glycemic index than sweet potato. So that choosing a grain-free food doesn't necessarily meet those kind of slow release carbohydrate requirements. So yeah, in terms of grain-free versus grain-inclusive, there isn't any particular reason to avoid grains unless your dog has a sensitivity to grains. But yeah, sensitivities to grains are a lot less common than we kind of shown to believe. I mean, food allergies in general are lower than you might think, but grains aren't the main cause of sensitivities. Some people find that their dogs do better without grain in their diet, that they just digest other ingredients better, or maybe they don't get so itchy, for instance. But yeah, there's many options of different grains and different non-grain carbohydrates. So it's not always necessary to just cut out all grains or include all grains. There's like humans, there's lots of smaller details within ingredients that we kind of do well or not so well with. So my advice on the grain versus grain-free argument would be that if your dog has a sensitivity to grains, then by all means avoid those and choose a grain-free option. But otherwise, there's no particular reason to avoid all grains, and but also if you don't want to include grains, there's no reason that you should go out of your way to do so either. I think that grain-free and grain carbohydrates can form great options within our dog's food. So just to be kind of open-minded to the possibility for including either, and that there are options in kind of both categories for some really high quality carbohydrate sources for our dogs. So I hope that that was useful. I'm aware that that was a bit of a heavier lunchtime with Laura than we usually do, a bit more I guess pet food detail and pet food industry based. So let me know if that's the kind of thing you want, or if you'd like me to look at some different topics next time. But I hope that was helpful to answer those questions. And yes, please do let me know your questions for next time. And as always, do continue to keep inviting your dog owning friends and family to join us here. It'd be fantastic to see some more people in the group who can join us and be a part of this community. And yeah, I hope we can demystify dog food for some other people as well. So thank you, and thank you for joining me and being a part of the group, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye.